Okay, we're on page 138 now, and the heading says shifts when both factors are decimals. Both factors are going to be decimals for the rest of this lesson, and what we've been working with so far is whole numbers times decimals. Now we're going to have two decimal numbers multiplied by each other, but we're going to be following the same shifting rules as well as the same rules that we were following when we just multiplied a whole number times a decimal. So the directions up here, read along with me, says multiply by 1/10. Think about what it means to take 1/10 of another part. You can think about money. So for numbers 26 and 27, again, we're going to be multiplying 1/10. For 26, we're multiplying 1/10 times 4/10. And it says, think, what is 1/10 of 1/10? Then, what is 1/10 of 4/10? And again, they gave the hint to think about money. So let me break it down for you a little bit before we practice the shifting patterns. So 1/10, we are going to, of course, relate to having one dime. And we want to know what 4/10 of this one dime is. Well, the first question is, well, what's 1/10 of 1/10? If I were to be searching for what's 1/10 of this dime, we would exchange this dime for pennies. And how many pennies would we exchange to equal one dime? We would have 10 pennies. So I'm not going to copy paste 10 pennies out, but just visualize 10 pennies over here. And then again, visualize those 10 pennies laid out. What is 1/10 then if I have 10 pennies? How many pennies would I pick out of my pile of 10 pennies? One. So 1/10 of a dime, or 1/10 of a dollar, is equal to 1 penny, which in currency or in dollar form is worth 1/100th of a dollar, or 1 cent, or 1 penny. But the question is then, what is 1/10 of 4/10? So then this changes the situation a little bit. We would be having for 4/10, we would have 4 dimes. And I want to know, what is 1/10 of these 4 dimes? Well, we would have to exchange for pennies. How many pennies are equal to 4 dimes? 400 pennies. Sorry, not 400 pennies. Sorry, 40 pennies. Oh my goodness. 10, 20, 30, 40 pennies. What's 1/10 of 40 pennies? Well, we break it apart basically group by group. If I did it with one group of pennies, I'd have one group of 10 pennies, I'd have 1 penny. But I'm going to do it for all 4 groups. And instead of having 1/10 of 1/10, it would be 1/10 of 4/10, and that would be equal to how many pennies? We would pick out of the 40, we'd pick out 4 pennies, and that's equal to 4 cents, or 4/100ths of a dollar. So money-wise, our answer there is 4/100ths, but let's talk about it with our place value chart. Remember, using our place value chart, we can use this anytime we see if we're multiplying by 1,000, 100, or 10, or 1/10, or 100th, or even 1,000ths. So we are multiplying by 1/10 here, so let's follow the steps that we were following before. The first step is we're going to write the other factor in which we're multiplying by our base 10, and we're going to write it on the first line. So go ahead and write it out with me. 4/100ths. And why did we choose 4/100ths? That's the opposite factor that we're multiplying our base 10 by. And we're going to be doing the shifting pattern that we've been practicing. When we multiply by 1/10, do we move to the left or to the right? We move to the right, we get smaller. How many place values for 1/10? 1 place value. So the 4 moves from the tenths to the hundredths, and that's the only digit other than 0, so we have to fill in the rest of the place values with 0 to hold its place value, and we get 4/100ths. That's what we got down here. And there's a third way that we're going to solve, but we'll do that in a little bit. So let's just write it into our book. That's number 26, 400ths. Now we're going to be multiplying 1/10 times 400ths for number 27. So go ahead and erase your place value chart. We're going to write in the opposite factor in which we're multiplying 1/10 by, and it's 400ths. Go ahead and add that into the first row just like I did. Do you have a 4 in the hundredths place value? And it says, think, what is 1/10 of 100th? Then what is 1/10 of 400ths? Again, we don't have any currency after the penny. So for the thousands place value, we're thinking of literally breaking our penny apart into 10 pieces and having tenths of pennies. What is 1/10 of a penny then? Well, it's just like this little sliver of a penny, and it's worth 1,000th of a dollar. So if I exchange one penny, or in this case, we cannot exchange. If I break our penny or split our penny into 10 pieces, 1/10 of a penny would equal 1,000ths. But let's say in this case, we have 400ths, so we have 4 pennies. And if we break those apart and take one piece out of each group of 10, we'd have 4 pieces of 1,000th of a dollar, or 1/10 of a penny, to get 4,000ths. And again, we are following the shifting pattern of multiplying 1/10 means shift to the right, one place value. The 4 went from the hundredths to the thousands. And then we fill in our zeros all the way to our ones place value. And we get our answer of 4,000ths. Go ahead and add that into your book. Do you have these two answers nice and clear? Number 28 says, how many places did the 4 shift each time you multiplied? And in which direction? So think about it. We just did this one. How many times did the 4 move for this one? And for the last one we completed? 1 time. And in which direction? Right or left? Right. Our values are getting smaller. Digits are shifting to the right. Number 29 says, look at your answers. What pattern do you see in the number of decimal places in the products? How is it related to the number of places in the two factors? So there's a third way that we can solve problems like this, and we've practiced this when we were multiplying whole numbers times decimals, and it's to look at the two factors as if they're whole numbers and multiply, and then make sure you have the same amount of place values in your product as you do in your factors. So let's take a look at number 26. 1/10 times 4/10. What I'd like you to do with me is let's underline the digit 1 and underline the digit 4. So both of those factors, we have 2 underlined digits. Why do we underline those digits? Well, because we are underlining the decimal places. There's 1 decimal place for this, or 1 digit that comes after the decimal, and there's 1 decimal place for 4/10. 4 comes after the decimal. How many decimal places are there in all for both of these factors? 1 here and 1 here gives us a total of 2. So go ahead and write a little 2 above your multiplication sentence, just like I did. And let's count how many decimal places are there in our product of 400ths. Starting with the decimal, we'll work our way over. 1, 2, 2 place values. Go ahead and write the little 2 up there. Let's do the same thing for 27. How many decimal place values are there in both factors for 1/10 times 400ths? Let's underline and count. For 1/10, there's 1 decimal place. For 400ths, how many decimal places are there? 1, 2. Which brings us to a total of 1 decimal place here, 2 decimal places here, gives us a total of 3 decimal places for both our factors. Let's count how many decimal places are there in our product of 4,000ths. Let's underline 1, 2, 3, brings us a total of 3 decimal place values. What pattern do you see? Look at the number of decimal places in our products and look at the decimal places in our factors. What pattern do you see? Okay, hope you see it. The number of decimal place values or places in the product is the same as the number of decimal places in both of our factors. So let's write that out for number 29. That's the pattern that I hope you saw. The number of decimal places in the product is the same as the total number of decimal places in the factors. Please make sure you have this exact sentence in your book. I'll read it out loud one more time for you. The number of decimal places in the product is the same as the total number of decimal places in the factors. Do you have this written into your book, number 29? Okay, let's move on.